Okay, let's dive in. We are tearing into some source material today that really flips the script on how we think about understanding information, especially in research. We're looking at some fascinating insights, actually, from a special issue of the Journal of Research Practice. And it zeroes in on something usually considered, well, a bit of a problem.
Right, the researcher's own subjectivity.
Exactly.
Yeah, for a long time, particularly in qualitative research, the emphasis has been on the researcher being, highly aware of their own background perspectives, potential biases.
Reflexivity, right. That's the
one. Reflexivity. And the traditional view, which these sources discuss, was that you need to be transparent about these things, primarily to manage them.
Okay.
To minimize the risk of your own stuff getting in the way and biasing your findings. Subjectivity was often seen as something to control.
Or just mitigate, kind of push to the side.
Precisely. You were aiming for neutrality as much as possible.
Like a clean lens, making sure you weren't distorting what you were seeing or hearing. But what's exciting about this new direction, the one highlighted in the special issue, is that it draws heavily from psychoanalytic thinking and suggests, well, a totally different approach.
It really does. It proposes that researcher subjectivity isn't just a potential source of bias to be defended against, but can actually be a powerful tool for deeper understanding.
A tool? How so?
It's about actively using your own internal experience, your thoughts, feelings, even maybe unexpected physical sensations that come up during the research process, using those as a source of data.
Okay, wait. As data itself?
Yes, as a way to gain insight.
And that's our mission for this deep dive then. We're going to unpack this big idea. How can a researcher's own inner world, informed by psychoanalytic concepts like countertransference, how does that become a sensitive instrument for understanding?
Understanding the people they're studying or the situations they're observing. We'll look at how this works in practice, drawing on specific examples from these articles.
Yeah, because it sounds like a perspective that could open up some surprising avenues.
Definitely. It suggests that paying attention to your own internal state can help you understand not just what people are consciously saying,
right,
but also maybe seemingly contradictory or irrational patterns, unconscious dynamics in relationships, and how these subtle, non-conscious influences shape our interactions and perceptions, including, how we actually do research.
Okay, so let's jump into this pivot. How did we get from subjectivity as a problem to subjectivity as a tool?
Well, the source points out this shift mirrors something that's happened in clinical practice. Psychoanalysts and psychodynamic therapists increasingly recognize that their own internal experience while working with a patient.
The stuff going on inside the therapist.
Exactly. Particularly feelings, thoughts, or images that seem to come out of the blue. They realized it isn't just their stuff getting in the way.
Okay.
These internal experiences, often called countertransference, are now seen as a crucial source of information about the patient.
So the patient might be
rejecting or unconsciously inducing these feelings in the therapist, maybe as a way to communicate something they can't quite verbalize.
Okay, so in therapy, the therapist's feeling isn't just about the therapist. It's often a reaction to the patient that tells you something about the patient's inner world or how they impact others.
That's the idea.
And researchers are applying this to their work.
Precisely. Psychodynamic researchers are building on these clinical insights. They're arguing that the researcher's feelings, thoughts, even bodily experiences that arise during interviews or observations or data analysis, they can function in a similar way. These countertransference-like reactions become data. Data about the research subject or the dynamics of the research situation itself.
But wait, isn't this just being reflective about your biases? I mean, we already talk about that in qualitative research.
That's a really critical distinction to make. While many qualitative approaches value reflexivity, the psychodynamic approach adds a specific layer.
Which is?
An intense alertness to the causal influence of unconscious motivational systems.
Unconscious motivational systems. What does that mean in this context? Like primal drives?
Sort of. It means being attuned to the potential intrusion of deep, often unacknowledged drives, desires, fears, or defenses, both in the research participant and the researcher.
Okay, so not just conscious attitudes or opinions.
No, these are more fundamental, often hidden dynamics. Things like unconscious needs for connection or maybe defense against vulnerability, really basic human stuff.
So it's about recognizing that those deeper, less rational parts of ourselves and the people we study are always active.
Always.
And can powerfully influence the research interaction and finding.
Exactly. And because these dynamics are unconscious, they can't simply be reflected upon in a straightforward way. You can't just think your way through them easily.
Right, because you might not even know they're there.
Precisely. So the implication is that this approach requires a much deeper level of introspection. And often, it necessitates external support.
Like supervision.
Yeah, supervision or peer consultation. Something to help the researcher understand what their internal reactions might actually mean.
And how to translate them into meaningful research insights.
Right. You need help seeing your own blind spots, especially when those spots are rooted in unconscious processes.
That makes a lot of sense. So where did this particular collection of ideas, this special issue, actually come from?
Well, the idea for the issue grew out of conversations between Stephen Soldz. He works from a U.S. perspective, integrating psychoanalytic practice with both quantitative and qualitative research.
Okay.
And Linda Lundgaard Andersen, representing a European perspective. She often uses psychoanalytic concepts in broader psychosocietal analysis and critical theory.
So they both had this psychodynamic background and saw the potential.
Yes, exactly. They both had clinical training and this passion for applying these concepts beyond the consulting room. But they came from different communities of practice.
Bringing together different traditions.
U.S. psychoanalytic practice, qualitative clinical research versus European psychosocietal analysis, critical theory, hermeneutics, Tavistock influences. Quite a mix.
And their goal?
Their goal was really to bring awareness of these growing trends in psychoanalytically informed research to a wider audience, to show how these ideas could deepen our understanding of subjectivity's role in research and introduce relevant methodologies.
And they were clear this wasn't about reigniting old methodological wars, like qualitative versus quantitative.
Absolutely. They explicitly state this isn't about that debate at all. They acknowledge the robust growth in psychodynamically oriented quantitative research happening simultaneously.
So this complements that work.
Yes. This issue focuses on how insights from psychoanalytic thinking, particularly about subjectivity, can enrich studies across various disciplines, regardless of their primary methodology.
Okay, so the core idea is using the researcher's subjective internal experience, viewed through a psychoanalytic lens that is sensitive to unconscious dynamics, using that as a source of valuable data.
That's the heart of it.
How does this actually work in different research settings? The articles give us some examples, right?
They do, and they show this applies in really diverse ways. Let's look at a few that highlight how this process unfolds. Take Linda Lundgaard Andersen's article on fieldwork.
Okay.
She argues that when you're doing fieldwork, deeply embedded in a setting, trying to balance participation and observation, you're constantly subject to psychodynamic processes.
Because you're right there in the thick of it, interacting with people and just sort of soaking up the atmosphere.
Exactly. She illustrates how concepts like transference,
where people react to you based on their past relationships.
Yes, and institutional transference, how the dynamics of the organization itself get projected onto you or the research.
Ah, okay.
She argues these aren't just things to avoid, but can provide critical insight. For example, in her work looking at efficiency and democracy initiatives in Danish organizations, her own feelings and experiences in the setting helped her understand the deep-seated, often unconscious dynamics playing out within those institutions.
So her reactions were like a window.
In a way, yes. Her subjective reactions became a way to sort of feel into the organizational culture.
That's fascinating. So your own emotional response to the organization becomes information about the organization itself. What about understanding individuals? Especially when behavior seems, irrational.
Anne Levine's work on care workers in elderly care is a great example here. She observed patterns that seemed contradictory.
Like what?
Moments of intense commitment mixed with periods of withdrawal. She called it empathy at a distance.
Empathy at a distance, okay.
And she found that understanding these patterns required her to pay close attention to her own internal processing of what she was observing. She calls this using the researcher's language as a hermeneutical key.
Her internal language, what does that mean exactly?
It means using her own subjective reactions, the thoughts, feelings, images, maybe even bodily sensations that came up as she processed the care worker's stories and actions, using those reactions as a way to interpret what she was seeing. The source notes, this connects to how caregiving relationships can stir up our own early memories of being cared for,
Right, deep stuff.
So perhaps her own internal experience, resonating with these themes of care and distance, helped unlock the meaning behind the care worker's mixed behaviors. Her feelings weren't just a distraction.
They were part of the interpretation.
Exactly. Revealing something that care workers themselves might not have fully grasped consciously.
Wow, so your own internal world can echo the subject's inner world and help you understand it. But what happens when the researcher encounters something really difficult or just gets stuck?
Jill Whitehouse-Hart's article is interesting on this. It looks at unconscious communication in interviews and how a researcher's own defenses can actually block insight.
Okay.
She had a media research project where she basically hit a wall trying to understand the interview data. Just couldn't make sense of it.
Been there.
Right. She realized she needed to engage not just her cognitive analytical skills, but also her emotional and even less rational responses to the material.
So analyzing the words wasn't enough.
No. She describes needing to surrender to the dream communication.
Whoa. Okay. What does that mean? Sounds a bit mystical.
It does sound a bit out there, but it refers to allowing herself to engage with the more associative, symbolic, and emotional aspects of the interview material and her reaction to it. Kind of like how you might work with a dream in therapy.
Okay, letting go of pure logic for a bit.
Yeah, and this helped her move past her own omnipotent defenses, these internal blocks, or ways she was maybe rigidly controlling the data that were stopping her from seeing deeper patterns.
Getting past her own resistance.
Exactly. By trusting and processing her less conscious reactions, she gained crucial insight she couldn't get otherwise.
Surrendering to the dream as a research method that really highlights the depth of this psychodynamic influence. It's about allowing yourself to be affected and then using that effect.
That's a good way to put it.
So let's look at some other ways this plays out. How about combining methods?
Yes, Hansen and Dybro talk about combining psychodynamic approaches with autoethnography.
Where the researcher's own experience is central.
Right. They suggest researchers can introspect not just on interview texts, but also on their own feelings, fantasies, bodily experiences that arise. This personal, affective process becomes a key step in interpretation.
And they used this.
Where? In a study of peer support for people with mental illness. So the researcher's internal journey was part of analyzing the effectiveness of peer support.
Interesting. What about tension? Can conflict in the research itself be useful?
Definitely. Schmidt's article explores how the psychodynamics of interactions can reveal social or cultural dynamics.
Oh.
She gives an example of interviewing a social education student. Conflicting demands and expectations maybe about the course or becoming a professional played out as tension between the researcher and the interviewee.
So the interview itself got tense.
Yes. But that tension wasn't just noise. It became a valuable source of information for understanding the pressures and conflicts involved in becoming a professional in that field. The difficulty was the data, in a sense.
Okay, that's a powerful idea. What about just staying open?
Ramvi focuses on that. Psychoanalysis and ethnography both emphasize the researcher's experience, right? Mm-hmm. She explains how a psychoanalytic approach can unfold material by examining the researcher's struggle to remain open.
Open in what way?
Defined broadly relating to self and other, emotions and actions, inner and outer worlds. She used this in studying teacher learning, looking at how the researcher's own difficulty staying open to the experience illuminated the teacher's learning processes.
So the researcher's struggle mirrors the subject's struggle.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
Or it reveals something about the dynamics of learning itself.
And this applies in organizational settings too, right? Not just individuals.
Absolutely. Froggatt and Briggs discuss practice near research in human services.
What's that?
It aims to get really close to the interface between institutions and practice thick description, reflexivity, looking at emotional processes.
Okay. Very grounded.
Exactly. And they argue psychoanalytically informed approaches are particularly useful here, building on traditions like reflective practice common in those fields. It helps understand the emotional reality of working within complex systems.
What about studying, say, powerful figures like CEOs?
Wolf Ridgway applied work psychodynamics and an astute clinical methodology to analyze CEOs' presentation of self.
How they come across.
Yes. And crucially, the subjective, intersubjective relationship between the researcher and the CEO significantly impacted the interpretations. Meaning how they related to each other, the feelings involved, revealed knowledge that likely wouldn't have been accessible through just observation or standard interviews. The researcher's clinical sensibility was key.
It feels like we're getting deeper into the clinical parallels. What about concepts like projective identification?
Hueso delves into that, deepening the understanding of countertransference and projective identification in a clinical case study context.
Remind us what projective identification is again.
It's complex. But broadly, the idea is that a subject might unconsciously put feelings or aspects of themselves into another person, the researcher or analyst, inducing specific subjective reactions in them.
Like making the researcher feel a certain way.
Yes. Visceral bodily reactions, psychic imagery like dreams or fantasies. It's seen as a way the subject communicates something outside their own awareness.
And the researcher's job.
To receive this, contain it, sort through these often confusing emotional reactions within themselves, and then interpret what's being communicated unconsciously. It's a very involved internal process.
That requires a lot of self-awareness and containment from the researcher.
Immense. It's probably the most explicitly clinical application discussed.
Does this focus on subjectivity mean quantitative data is irrelevant?
Not at all. Motivational touches on this, pointing out that even quantitative analysis, like statistical patterns and dream narratives, requires interpretation.
The numbers don't speak for themselves.
Exactly. Statistical patterns need to be understood within the dialogic contexts of desire and defense. So, hermeneutics interpretation informed by psychoanalytic concepts is still needed, even with quantitative data.
It seems applicable across many areas. What about health experiences?
Yes. Aiden, Guloglu, and Kusku used a psychoanalytic perspective to understand the subjective life experiences of women with breast cancer.
What did they find?
Taking intrapsychic processes into account provided significant insights. They found that receiving the diagnosis, while obviously very different from other life events, was often processed in a common way by participants, linked to deeper psychological patterns.
So understanding the inner world helped make sense of the reaction to this major external event.
Precisely.
Okay.
And briefly, Horowitz mentions applying these ideas to self-identity theory, allowing for specification of intrapsychic conflicts, using methods like narrative analysis, maybe even incorporating things like mapping sentences.
So across all these diverse examples, fieldwork, interviews, therapy cases, organizational studies, health research, even quantitative analysis.
Right.
The common thread seems to be this: paying close attention to the researcher's internal experience, informed by these psychoanalytic concepts. It provides a richer, deeper understanding.
Yes, a deeper understanding of the research subject, the process, the interaction itself. It helps uncover dynamics that might be hidden or otherwise very difficult to access.
It transforms the researcher from, a potential source of bias that you have to constantly guard against into a highly sensitive instrument, one capable of picking up subtle, often unconscious signals.
Exactly. Turning that complex internal experience into a powerful hermeneutical key, a key for interpretation.
It helps uncover dynamics that would likely remain hidden if you were only focused on the observable facts or conscious statements.
Or if you were trying too hard to erase your own presence, your own reactions from the research encounter.
This has been a really fascinating deep dive. We started by looking at how researcher subjectivity has traditionally been viewed mainly as a source of bias, something to be managed, minimized.
Right, controlled.
And we've explored this, quite different direction, heavily influenced by psychoanalytic thinking, which suggests that researcher subjectivity, especially when understood through concepts like countertransference and unconscious dynamics, can actually be a vital tool.
A tool for gaining deeper and richer insights into research subjects and processes. It's quite a paradigm shift, really.
It really is. It's about allowing your own internal experience, your feelings, your reactions, even those surprising or uncomfortable ones, allowing them to become a source of information.
A way to understand the other person or the situation in ways you maybe couldn't otherwise.
Transforming that internal signal into meaningful data.
Yeah.
So here's something to leave you with, something to ponder as we wrap up. If paying close attention to one's own internal experience, those gut feelings, unexpected thoughts, or surprising reactions can be such a powerful tool for a researcher, helping them understand someone else or a complex situation more deeply. How might paying more attention to your own subjective responses help you understand the information you encounter, the relationships you have, or the situations you navigate in your own daily life?